In this edition of Artifacts, the colorful realism of Kelsey Rowling.
I got to a point where I was like, I can just paint my representation that I want. It kind of serves as filling gaps in places where I think they need to be filled.
Cowboys who use poetry and music to celebrate their culture.
I think people come here and they sort of revel in the idea that that there still is a life on the land.
Bold and abstract canvases.
I've never really given myself like a label. A lot of people say that I paint with joy.
And a self-taught impressionist artist.
It's the feel that you get. It's a feel. It's all about your feeling. You gotta feel it from your soul and from your heart and your mind.
It's all ahead on this edition of Artifacts.
Funding for Artifacts is made possible by Sandy Raffelli, the June S. Wisham Estate, Carol Frank Buck, Merrill and Lebo Newman, Heidi Marie Rockland, Meg and Dillard Myers, the annual contributions of PBS Reno members, and by
Hello, welcome to Artifacts. I'm Guinevere Clark, filling in for Beth McMillan. Imagine brightly colored backgrounds with realistic portraits of pop culture icons. I'm describing the art of Kelsey Rowling, a young artist based in Reno who focuses her work on representation.
My name's Kelsey Rowling. I'm a painter full-time right now. I do a lot of work that focuses on like intersectional feminism because of lack of representation. Basically just like figurative works of women of color, I would describe my work as, with varying influences depending on what's going on in my life.
Kelsey's a portrait artist, so when we approach portraiture, that third wall is completely broken. So we get to stare at the subject, spend time with the subject, which is the really impactful thing about portraiture work and the ability that Kelsey is able to have on her audience. It's just this profound sense of like, who is the subject? How can I get to know them? How can I do a little more research to understand them, especially in regards to the pop cultural references and the art history references that she has throughout her work.
I get a lot of my ideas from looking at a bunch of things. I'm really fascinated by like how saturated our visual world is. So I like look a lot at social media things like Instagram and like see cool photos or paintings. So it starts with getting reference images. I use kind of mixed media. I paint with a lot of acrylic paint as base layers, and then I use oil paints to do my figures mainly. So I can get like really good detail on them. I'll pick just like a solid color that I think is like really beautiful and just kind of base the whole painting energetically around that. And that's where I like start with the acrylics, and then I'll do a rough sketch of the figure, and then I'll paint it in with oils from there. A lot of what makes something look real is focusing on things that you wouldn't want to include on a face almost if you're drawing it. I remember when I was younger, I would draw things and I wouldn't include certain shadows or certain blemishes or certain marks under the eyes that like really make something look realistic. So I try to just focus on little highlights and different colors and shading because there's just so much variation that goes into a face and like skin tones. I look at a lot of references, but like painting it as it's seen and not how your brain wants to see it. I think that's made me like expand my idea of beauty in a lot of ways too, which was nice. I'm just more accepting of a lot of different things because it all just looks so beautiful to me.
The type of response that we typically get from Kelsey's work comes from an audience that's more connected with social media. So we get a little bit of mostly consisting of young people just really vibing her work, really into the subject matter she's pursuing.
I know my art isn't necessarily geared towards a younger audience, but I think having people who look like me or can relate to me and like see me as like an artist who's just painting people that look something like them would be really nice, because like that's what I wanted when I was younger. So I like hope to kind of have that for people who need that as well, like regardless of how old they are. I grew up in like a different time than it is now. We all grew up in a time where there wasn't really a lot of places where you'd see Black people or brown people in things. That really influenced me a lot as a kid, because I know like a lot of other people of color can relate to like wanting to look different or act different. Growing up, it's hard when you're just like, where am I in these places? I got to a point where I was like, I can just paint my representation that I want. It kind of serves as filling gaps in places where I think they need to be filled. People gain an understanding and can relate to people if they like see them. If you grew up with a bunch of people who looked really different, you don't think that's weird. If you grow up in like Reno and there's not a lot of brown people, like you don't really know how to like interact with them sometimes. And like I experienced that growing up. It's just people being like confused by my hair, or confused about my parents because they're like a biracial couple, so they didn't understand. More exposure to different types of people just creates more tolerance in a way, or accepting in a way, or just normalization at least. I want people to stop for a moment. I want it to have enough detail, enough confusion in it that people like take a moment to look at it. I'm intrigued by like personal understanding of it, because I think everybody responds to everything differently given their background and given their opinions on art. I would like them to just like question like where we see people and like how we see them and like how we interact with them, and like recognize beauty in different forms and different ways.
To see more of Rolling's artwork, visit her website at krollingarts.com. Cowboys from around the world gather in Nevada to share stories, music, and poems. Let's take a look at the endearing art of the American West.
Through the rocks and the sands and all deserts demands, through the sky that's eternally blue, I will ride through the day and will work without pay to stay on my dear old desert home, my desert home, burning.
Traditions that are being carried on here at the Elko Cowboy Poetry Gathering are something that can't be duplicated anywhere else.
I think people come here and they sort of revel in the idea that that there still is a life on the land, and that life bears fruit that is poetic and musical, and it's just very real.
I've made my living horseback for over 30 years, and I still do. It's a privilege to be able to share those things that I get to experience in real time that someone else may only know by the spoken word at a performance. So I feel like the material deserves to be handled with care, and I really want to do that skillfully.
The heritage in this community is ranching, and a lot of the great singers and cowboy poets who are at this event are from this area. They're from buckaroo culture.
If you think about it, if it weren't for Elko, there's a lot of cowboys out there that don't come to Elko or don't go to gatherings that probably write music, poetry that we don't know about. And this gives the world a chance to hear unsung cowboys.
The hills get awful quiet when you have to camp alone, and it's mighty apt to start a feller thinking. You'll almost always waken when a horseshoe hits a stone, or you hear the sound of hobble chains a-clinking.
When we started this event, we really made most of our decisions based on what we thought would attract cowboys and ranch people. It's really because of the cowboy poets who I've met, who I thought were courageous and decided to make a stand and say their own poems and write their own songs.
It helps a fella see himself through other people's eyes, and when he does, his pride takes quite a fall. 'Cause when you're all alone and thinking, friend, you come to realize that you're a mighty common feller after all. Bruce Kiskadden. There's been a growth over the years that has, I think, improved the quality of work. It hasn't lessened the value of the classics, but it has certainly increased the quality of the contemporary stuff.
I've been playing for almost 5 years now at Cowboy Poetry Gatherings. And a lot of the times people will be a little worried, I think, because of my age, especially when I was younger, 14 and 15, about what I was going to be portraying as cowboy music. And I have a very different take on cowboy music. I have so much respect for the traditions, but I write from a position of a teenage girl. I write about how different it is to be a woman riding broncs and working on a ranch, and kind of my perspective of that.
Can't cut a calf and rope a cow, set a trap, shoot coyotes, hold the reins, twist a wire, sew a patch for a baby boy. They may look small.
I know a lot of young ranch kids who are great cowboys and good horsemen, and they're immersed in the culture, but not in the arts that emerged from the work. So it's great to find young people who not only can go out and get a job done, but they have embraced the art form that really is unique and specific to the cowboy culture.
We're all in this to have an art form live and survive and thrive.
That's another part of the traditions at Elko that is so important, is that we get to pass it on to the younger kids. They are the next generation after me, and that's kind of a staggering thought for me.
It expanded over the years to be more than just performance-oriented. It isn't just storytelling, poetry, and song. Other things have come in that have made it richer. It's dispelled a lot of mythology with people who don't rub shoulders with the cowboy culture or the ranching culture or the farming culture. We have a tendency to isolate and separate, and so a lot of folks who don't know sickum about cow can come here and hear the perspective of someone who that has been a centerpiece of their life.
And I think cowboys, we are a dying breed, and we need to be able to have the authority to speak in a way that people will listen.
It's an honorable profession that has diminished in numbers, and it's great to see a stronghold of that culture here being celebrated, both by rural dwellers and urban dwellers.
I think people value this. You know, they come and they're nurtured by it. Being around these other artists give me heart to go on, to keep creating, to keep performing, to keep writing new poetry, to stay engaged.
So be warned by my lot, which I know you will not, and learn about women from me.
To learn more about this year's event, go to nationalcowboypoetrygathering.org. And now let's take a look at this week's art quiz. Which one of these important artists is best known for their photography and focuses on issues including racism, sexism, politics, and personal identity? Is the answer A. Romare Bearden, B. Alma Woodsey Thomas, C. Horace Pippin, or D. Carrie Mae Weems? Stay tuned for the answer. For our next segment, meet Columbus artist Brendan Spivey. His use of bold colors and playful shapes reflects his lively personality.
I'm
never really given myself like a label. A lot of people say that I paint with joy, energy, so those who know me know that I can be very energetic, and I think a lot of that personality comes out in some of the colors that I use, shapes that I use. There's never gonna be anything overly dull or dramatic. I like action, so you'll see large swipes, bright colors, texture. So that's kind of how I view my work. So I'm a big fan of abstract, which is kind of ironic because that's what I do. It was more about I didn't like the literal interpretation necessarily of like skylines or barns and trees. I liked being able to have my own vision of what the art piece meant, because I think abstract painters paint with intention, but we also paint with intuition. So I found it really kind of fascinating just to see like what do I see going into the piece versus like what they said that they saw. 2017, I was looking for something a little more productive to do as far as stress relief. You know, I used to run and lift, and not that that's not productive, it just takes a lot of time and dedication, but I wanted something a little more. So I think for me, looking at artwork was always kind of therapeutic, so I wanted to give that a shot, and not being trained to do this was it was different. This is the Haley Gallery. For me, this place, it's very homey, and what I like about it is I can find everything that I want. So if I'm looking for abstract art, if I'm looking for glass, I'm able to find that here. So it's not just a gallery to me, it's like a home. So I will have rotations of artwork in, so I typically will have between 3 to 5 pieces at a time in. This one is called Rise Up. So this kind of all goes back to some of the movements that we're currently going through, social unrest and all that stuff. So I wanted to give something, and you look at the tones of browns and earth tones, so it's kind of pushing you a certain direction without necessarily taking you all the way there. We wanted to kind of get involved in the whole Black Lives Matter movement, not necessarily through protest and those means, but how can we use our artistic voices to make a very strongly stated message without saying words. And the 2 murals that we did, the first one was at the Ohio Theater, and it was a compilation of fields of flowers and young children that were Black, and she was picking flowers, and the young boy had a paintbrush. And then I came in as the artistic abstract sky of shapes and color, and Will came in with the cityscape, and I think it was a really great fusion of all of our talents together, because normally you would not have an abstract painter mixed with 2 more traditionally trained artists. But I think that to me that's what made the work so powerful. Spencer, that's awful close, buddy. So Spencer is my double doodle. High five? Yes! He's another reason I do a lot of the things that I do. You get all the treats. I get joy out of seeing him enjoy things in life, and it's the money that comes in from art sales helps put him in the daycare, pays for his vet bills that are so expensive, and just overall, just everyday things for him. Like, that's my buddy. And you lay flat? He brings me joy. And I think having more joy in my life, I think has also probably helped my artwork transcend. You didn't see how handsome you were. I think another thing that kind of drove me to want to become a painter was being told that painters are born this way. Artists are born artists, and they're artists their entire lives. That for me was a personal challenge. So not only was I wanting to get out there and paint and find a way to relax, I wanted to prove somebody wrong. And been a hit so far, so I was right. You don't know what you're capable of until you do it. And I live my life that way. And I want to get out there and just try it.
To learn more, visit brendanspivey.com. And now let's review this week's art quiz. Which one of these important artists is best known for their photography and focuses on issues including racism, sexism, politics, and personal identity. Is the answer A. Romare Bearden, B. Alma Woodley Thomas, C. Horace Pippin, or D. Carrie Mae Weems? And the answer is D. Carrie Mae Weems. Eddie Mormon of Louisiana started painting at a very young age. Since then, he has created a multitude of impressionist works rich with color, movement, and feeling.
I learned how to paint from the dirt down here, on the ground, when I was 5 years old, in the veds, in the weeds, in the mud, in the clay. I would take flowers and make water with it and get all the juice of it and turn the color in a little bottle. When the clay we had with that red Alexander clay, it get hard for, you could make pottery with that kind of stuff. I paint on clay, paper, wood. 1969, I working at Piccadilly's. They had a little old woman. She was very godly. She had a good spirit, blonde hair, and she was the mother of Piccadilly's. She bought my first painting. I paint every day. I be inspired with what God tell me what to paint. Duck painting, that's gonna be a fundraiser. See, I'm an artist. When people tell me what they want, I give them what they want. They want a building, I'll do a building. Look at Chef John Foltz. I worked 25 years on the waterfront. I just had to get up early in the morning. And early in the morning is the best time for me to see the moon, the star, the first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter, and the last quarter, and the stars. They inspire me like Van Gogh. All your master painters use. Big painting is museum painting like Rembrandt. I painted 80 by 60. Customized canvas made out of Houston, Texas. You gotta have lots of paint to cover that. I painted sunflowers. I painted Lake Charles Bridge. I painted Hawaii. And I got some more commission to paint that airport here in Lake Charles on 80 by 60. I make my own color. See, I use primary color. I don't go with all those off color. You make your color like you're cooking. I'm colorblind. I see shadows and shades. In French, I painted with a knife. My favorite part about painting is it comes from your soul. It's a feel that you get. And when that feel you get within, it's just like singing. Nobody can stop you from expressing yourself. It's a spiritual thing, really. For anybody that do something from their soul, you cannot put a time on it. It comes from you. How long it take? You take like your musician like Marvin Gaye, all your the staple singer, all the ones Stevie Wonder, or R&B or a record. Well, you know what? It's the feel that you get. It's a feel. It's all about your feeling. You gotta feel it from your soul and from your heart and your mind. It better not be no few days. You starve and go broke. It's a very hard living to make. If artists don't go on the road and get exposure, the best thing for them to do is just say, well, I'm been doing it as a hobby. Or I go all over. I went to Colorado Springs, New York, Paris, France. Well, if it takes for me to get there, I'll be there. I'm living to see my fame. Praise the Lord.
Discover more at facebook.com/Eddie Mormon Artists. And that wraps it up for this edition of Artifacts. For more arts and culture or to watch past episodes, visit pbsreno.org/artifacts. Until next week, we are PBS Reno. Thanks for watching.
Funding for Artifacts is made possible by Sandy Raffelli, the June S. Wisham Estate, Carol Frank Buck, Merrill and Lebo Newman, Heidi Marie Rockland, Meg and Dillard Myers. The annual contributions of PBS Reno members, and by